Today I'd like to talk about my Spellblade build in Elden Ring. This is a build that can nearly do it all. The build works fine in melee combat, using weapons that will scale extremely well with high intelligence, and with enough armor to give us a reasonable degree of survivability. As a caster, we've chosen spells that can be used to react to nearly any situation we find ourselves in. What this build lacks in, however, is self buffs, as we won't be using any incantations. And to a degree, it doesn't have many ways to deal with large packs of enemies, aside from the Ash of War we are using on our weapons. The starting class we're going to be choosing is the Astrologer. This gives us the most optimal starting stats for our endgame build, as well as starting us off with a staff and a few spells to carry us through the game's earliest bosses. It is likely that you will want to change the staff out for the Meteorite staff, and change one of your spell slots for Rock Sling. But defeating enemies such as the Mad Pumpkin Head at the Waypoint Ruins to reach Sorceress Settlement should be no problem. With B scaling in intelligence at plus 10, the Wings of Estelle will do 159 plus 33 physical damage and 191 plus 170 magic damage, for a combined total of 547 per Wing of Estelle, which we will be dual wielding for its power stance weapon combos. You can only get one Wing of Estelle per playthrough, so you will either want a friend to trade you one, perhaps from another character of yours, or do another new game cycle to acquire two. The Wing of Estelle has a nice weapon art known as Nebula. This Ash of War releases a dark cloud in a 120-degree arc that explodes after a short while for very strong magic damage. If you choose to wear the Spellblade armor set from Sorcerer RadGigaChad instead of the armor I use in this build, each piece will increase the damage by 2%. The heavy attacks on this weapon release a short-range wave of magic, which costs no FP. At plus 10, Lucette's staff has S scaling and intelligence, and is the strongest high intellect staff in the game, doing 364 spell scaling. This extra scaling does come at the cost of 50% extra FP per spell, so if you decide that is too hefty, feel free to use a different staff. Another weapon option would be the Moonlight Greatsword. If this is a route you choose to take, you'll need to take a few levels out of perhaps dexterity and some intellect, and put those points into strength to hit 16. The first spell we're going to be using in this build is the Carrion Slicer. This costs 4 FP and does sorcery scaling times 1.8 damage per swing. This spell has the highest damage per FP ratio out of all spells in the game. We will be using this spell to rapidly spam L1s for high damage as a reprieve from simply using our Wings of Estelle. We will also be using Adula's Moonblade. This costs 22 FP, and the initial slash inflicts sorcery scaling times 1.33 magic damage before resistances, while the projectile inflicts sorcery scaling times 1.89 magic damage before resistances. This spell can also apply Frostbite, with 90 build-up from the slash and 35 from the projectile. When we use the spell, we want to try to hit with both the blade and the projectile to maximize damage, and chain it together multiple times to lower its cast time after the initial cast. The Carrion Phalanx costs 24 FP, and each individual glint blade deals sorcery scaling times 0.48 magic damage, and fires 9 glint blades. This spell is especially good for taking down an enemy's stance, and should be cast as an extra offensive before moving into melee range. The Glintstone Pebble that we'll be using costs 7 FP, and does sorcery scaling times 1.52 magic damage before resistances. This spell has decent range and tracking. We will be using this spell to hit targets at range for a light hitting attack that is good for killing low health enemies without using a heavy amount of FP. It's also pretty good in PvP. Stars of Ruin costs 32 FP and does a moderate amount of damage, though I can't find exactly how much. Although it only has about a medium range, the tracking on this spell is amazing. We will be using it in situations where we need to hit a target prone to dodging or for a quick burst of damage. This spell is especially good for PvP. Loretta's Mastery costs 39 FP and does a colossal amount of damage. The true beauty of this spell, however, is its tracking and range. This spell we will use when enemy is far away and prone to dodging. If you decide to charge the spell, which you should, charging it all the way gives it a rough 20% more damage, whereas only half charging it does not affect the damage at all. The spell Terra Magica costs 20 FP and creates a spherical zone centered on a sigil, giving you a magic buff, increasing magic done from any source by 35%, lasting 30 seconds. We will mostly be using this buff to buff up the last spell on our list for easy mode boss cheese. The last spell that we're going to be using is Comet Azure. There really isn't much to say about this spell that you probably haven't seen in 100 other Elden Ring videos or in-game. This is going to be our stationary cannon. Use Terra Magica and drink our Wondrous Flask. Get the target in one place and blast. With the proper setup, the spell will absolutely nuke health bars. You can also wear Azure's Glintstone crown for even further damage. The first talisman that we're going to be using is the Dragon Crest Great Talisman. This talisman reduces physical damage taken by 20% or only 5 in PvP. We are mostly using this to negate the negative effects of Magic Scorpion Charm while also adding some tankiness to our build. We will be using Radagon Icon. This talisman is for shortening the cast time of spells. We'll also be using the Graven Mask Talisman. This talisman will increase the damage of our sorceries by 8%. The last talisman on our list is the Magic Scorpion Charm. This talisman increases magic damage by 12%, but increases physical damage taken by 10%. Our Dragon Crest will negate the physical damage taken and give us an extra 10% on top. For the armor, I've chosen to use the Navy Hood and the Carrion Knight set. The Navy Hood does give us a +1 to our Mind stat, and the Carrion Knight set does have solid defense. However, mostly it was about the look for me. Instead of the Navy Hood and the Carrion Knight set, you could also use Azure's Glintstone Crown for the extra common Azure damage, and the Spellblade set for extra Ash of War damage, such as for our Wing of Estelle, or if you choose to use it, the Moonblade Greatsword. For our stats, we're going to be doing 60 Vigor and 45 Mind. This gives us a reasonable health pool and a good amount of FP, which we'll be using a lot of in this build. Our Endurance is set to 11. This is the amount we need to medium roll with our gear setup. We have a Strength of 10 and Dexterity of 17. That is so that we can wield the Wings of Estelle. If you choose to use the Moonblade Greatsword instead, you'll need to change those stats a little bit. We have an Intelligence of 70, which scales very well with all of our damage that we do on this build. And our Faith and Arcane are at the starter stats for the Astrologer at 7 and 9. For our Wondrous Flask, it probably won't come as a surprise that we're using the Cerulean Hidden Tier that eliminates all FP consumption in the mixed physique, and the Magic Shrouding Crack Tier, which gives 20% damage for 3 minutes. These two together should always be used before performing our Comet Azure setup. For our Great Rune, we're going to be using Radon. Radon's Great Rune increases FP, Stamina, and FP by 15%. Our build could never have enough FP, so the extra 15% makes it a great choice. Having more HP and Stamina does not hurt us either. The hardest part about this build will probably be learning to cycle through your spells quickly in the midst of battle, and using the knowledge required to choose the right attack for the situation. This was the most fun for me while playing it, however. Using a diverse amount of attacks made the fights a lot more interesting and engaging for me. In this build, I felt really captured the essence of a Spellblade. If you try this build and decide that you like it, leave a comment below, tell me how you thought it was, what you might have changed about it. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please like it, give me a comment, and smash that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys in the lands between.